Cole, welcome to our first episode of COVID Conversations. It's great to have you here, and I appreciate you taking the time to be our guinea pig as our guest on our first episode here.
Thanks, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here under the circumstances, of course, but thanks for having me.
Well, we're here because of the circumstances. I'd love to, give our audience a little bit of insight into various professionals in the real estate industry and how they're handling the new normal. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of who you are, what you do, your types of clients, and tell us a little bit about how you used to operate, and then we could talk about more how things are now.
Sure. So I am a partner in a small boutique in downtown Boston. We focus, either fortunately or unfortunately, on commercial real estate and construction. And the reason I give that little caveat is before COVID, construction and commercial real estate was not at an all-time high, but pretty close to it. I mean, it was restaurant deals were getting done, office deals were getting done, prices that people hadn't seen before. And then as COVID came along, or as it started to ramp up, which was really in January and February, that all really, really shifted. So my real focus now and for the last 13 years has been on commercial real estate, commercial construction, and putting deals together. What that usually means in Boston is it's leasing. So when a restaurant comes in and needs space, they have to form their restaurant company. They need to find their location, and they need to get a lease up and running. There's lots of intricacies involved in that. The other segment of my client base are construction companies, or companies that are doing construction, which is similar but a little bit different. It's a lot of contract drafting. And then my other clients are mostly laboratories and incubators. And I bring up these three sectors because as COVID has arisen, I think they've each, it's really fascinating to see, if you think about the spectrum of those, restaurants are completely shut, right? Whereas laboratory and biotech companies have never been busier. So the work that I'm doing for each of those clients is almost dramatically different. What I'm doing for a restaurant is significantly different than what I'm doing for a laboratory. Does it make sense?
It does. I mean, you've got very different sets of clients here, because it sounds like your construction clients are largely on hold. I mean, it's currently May of 2020, and the city of Boston has a ban on construction. And I've been following you on LinkedIn, and it seems like you've been able to help some of your clients through navigate the construction regulations. How has that been, working with your clients to help them through that process? Like, have you been able to successfully get projects started again, or is it more managing expectations and helping them to understand how things will kick off when the city lifts its ban on construction?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of all of that. So the positive side is we have gotten four projects up and running that in the city of Boston had a specific exemption an exemption for COVID-related projects. So what was happening is we had actually in their biotech facilities that were just halted. So big contractors would come in, subcontractors would just stop per the order in Boston. We then had to jump through several hoops with the city to say, this is critical. We're either manufacturing or we're doing COVID-related research. We have to get back up and running. What was challenging about this is obviously nobody, certainly not in my lifetime, nobody's dealt with this. There wasn't a process for it. So you mentioned something in your question about managing expectations. Part of this was me telling clients, I'm the expert, but also I don't know what I'm doing because it's never been done before. So, come with me and we'll attack this together. So of those four projects, I'm happy to say they're all running now. One of them I think has actually been completed. But that exception is very, very small, right? So the application of that is at least in Boston, it's COVID specific. So on the other projects that I'm working on the construction side, it's about saying, okay, you're closed right now. How are you going to remobilize in 30 days or 60 days when things open back up? The crossover between the construction clients that are doing work now and the ones that might be doing it or will be hopefully doing it in the future is that they all now have to come up with COVID protocol. And I don't know if you've seen this, but companies have it, right? So Costco was in the news today or maybe yesterday about implementing a face mask policy throughout all of their stores across the United States. That's their new part of their new protocol. Like that, construction in Boston, construction companies, landlords, and tenants have to have their own protocol. So one of the things I'm running into, and I think you're going to see this in all sides of real estate, is you have a landlord, right, that owns the piece of property. They have their own protocol. You have a large construction contractor that has its own protocol, and then you have a tenant that may have its own protocol. And where it gets a little confusing is who, how do you coordinate all of that? And people are they're figuring it out. Unfortunately, everybody seems to be playing ball, knowing that it's all kind of new.
I mean, everyone's in the same boat. Everyone wants to be safe. So it makes sense that everyone's coming up with their own policies. Are these policies largely internally driven from conversations within the client, or are they coming down from government regulatory bodies, or is it too soon for that?
It's kind of too soon. So if you asked me that question last week, I would say it's all internally driven. But the Commonwealth has been, and it just issued some of its latest, and I think they're still proposed. I'm not even sure where it is in the process, and it may change while we're on this call. It's going to be driven from the state later on, but right now it's all internal. And I think what's nice is a lot of these contractors are sharing their information. So I could send you the protocol of large contractor A, and it's going to look a lot like large contractor B, because honestly, they're just saying, hey guys, let's all cooperate here, even though we're competitors.
Do you also have clients that are doing real estate conveyance work where they're buying commercial properties, selling commercial properties, or is it more of the construction and, not rehabbing, but the remodeling for lab space and restaurants, et cetera?
Yeah, so we do have some conveyancing. It's just, and we'll see what happens, right? Fortunately, I just closed out a conveyancing deal a few months back that was stalled for a little bit. We closed it out, and then all of this hit. I think I don't know, but my guess is what's happening in commercial real estate is there's obviously a lot of panic, and some of the buyers and sellers are sitting back and saying, okay, there's probably going to be a deal here. When do we strike? And so I think, and my gut tells me that for the next 60 days, conveyancing work is almost going to be at a halt. I'm talking about on the commercial side. I think you probably could tell me on the residential side that's not true, that you're still doing deals. But on the commercial side, and leasing as well, everybody's saying, hold on, we're not even sure. Say I was going to buy it and build a hotel. I'm not even sure when my hotel will be open. So let's all pause.
And what about on the commercial tenant side, for your clients, or just from people you're hearing from in the industry? What about restaurants that haven't been able to generate any revenue for months now, or doctors' offices, or any other types of commercial space where they haven't been paying their rent? Are landlords starting the eviction process? What's happening? Because if there's no rent paying the landlords aren't paying their mortgages. How does that work?
It's brutal. I mean, I can't think of a better way to say it. So right now in Massachusetts, there is a moratorium, sort of, on commercial evictions. And I say sort of because it only applies to small businesses, what are defined in a certain way. But for all intents and purposes, commercial evictions are stalled. You can't throw somebody out at the moment. So it gives tenants, of course, a little bit of leverage to go back to their landlords and say, you can't throw me out even if you wanted to. But the problem is bigger than that, right? You've got my restaurant clients continue to remind me that, Cole, even though, and I'm trying to remember when Massachusetts actually issued its order to shut down. It was right around St. Patty's Day, right? And, call it mid-March. My restaurant folks are saying we were feeling the hurt from this back in January. And then that went into February. So just keep this in the back of your mind when you're talking about renegotiating leases. It's not as if the restaurants haven't been able to open, I think now for 8 weeks, call it 2 months. But really, it's the loss of their business went further back from that. Okay. So they've had loss in February and March. And then from March, they were shut down. April, they're shut down. Currently, everything is set to sort of open, in what, May 18th, I think right now, which may get pushed back. But sorry for the long-winded answer. The hurt for the restaurants was on the front side, call it January, February up until now. And then, of course, when they get up and running, they're not going to be at 100% capacity. Even if they were allowed to have 100% capacity, which they're not going to be, people aren't going to just come out of their homes and act as if everything's normal again. So here's what we're doing. And every landlord has been different. I've had some really good landlords and some not so good landlords. We're effectively going to them and saying what I just said to you. We've lost money. We're currently losing money, and we're not going to make it back up for a while, maybe even all of 2020. But because we think that the commercial market is certainly cooling, you're going to have a hard time finding another tenant, and we put a lot of money into this restaurant, you have to work with us. I've got a lot of ideas on this. I've seen a few actually come to fruition and have worked. So some landlords are saying, we'll let you have 3 free months of rent, but we're going to tack it on at the end, or we're going to amortize it. We're going to give you 50% rent right now through the end of the year. We're going to treat it as a loan so that you have to pay it back. I think what's happening though, Jeff, is that these are some of these ideas that are coming through and that are getting executed look good, but nobody knows, July 1st, are you going to meet me up for a pint somewhere?
Probably not.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not just because you don't want to sit with me. You may not want to sit anywhere, right?
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. The whole bar scene in Boston, that's in some times of the year largely driven by college students. All the colleges are closed, sent their students home.
Yeah.
It already feels like it's summertime.
Yeah.
It's been quiet and the businesses are closed, and clearly everyone is hurting. And even once the government and the regulatory bodies say it's okay to be normal again, people aren't going to be normal again. I can't see myself just going back to a bar and standing next to someone and feeling the same way. I was just talking with you earlier before we started this conversation about how, we open the mail and we don't even open the mail. We just look at it like, should we touch it? Should we put gloves on? Do we let it sit for a few days? I don't know.
Can you imagine like now Jeff talking to Jeff 6 months ago, Jeff, and saying, hey, I'm nervous to open the mail. Like, I think Jeff 6 months ago would have been like, you're nuts.
Yeah. 6 months ago, if you asked me what an N95 mask was, I'd have to Google it.
Right. Yeah. I had a few in my basement and I had no idea. I used them for painting.
Yeah. I actually have literally 2 that I used for construction about a year ago.
Right.
And it seems like they might come in handy.
So with that in mind, you don't know what those, again, I use July, but I don't know, call it the fall. When you and I are, I don't know, we're going to watch a Pats game somewhere. Like, how crowded is it going to be? Where are we going to sit? And all this ties back to these restaurants saying, we don't know what kind of money we're going to have, and we know it's going to be less. And so what's happening right now, man, is we're estimating, and the estimates are 25% capacity. But does that mean that it's, you're 25% of your revenues? Do you have 25% of your staff? Because you start losing some economies of scale in restaurants, right? You can't have, when you have one chef, if you have seating for 100, but now you have seating for 50, are you paying that chef half of what you're paying him or her before?
Probably not.
No.
I think some business models are going to have to change, and especially in the restaurant space. I think things are going to shift to a new type of takeout. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not in the restaurant industry, but it'll be interesting to see how the industry has to evolve based on, what we're currently presented with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we shift topics for a minute to your personal business as a partner in a small boutique law firm here in Boston? What have you learned about yourself and your business operating as a small business operator here in Boston?
So, and I mentioned this, before we jumped on this call. The biggest thing for me, and it's more conceptual, is I found where our holes are, if that makes sense, more operationally, not in the way that we're doing business, but how we're kind of administering it. And you've seen before, right, where a bank will pay somebody to break into their bank, or somebody to kind of pressure test what's happening. Well, this has worked as a pressure test for small business, and it's made me realize that there are things that we've actually done really well. I mean, a lot of things were cloud-based before this happened, right? So things are backed up in 4 different places. In the old days, as a small business or as a small law firm, I would need to physically be in an office and open up a file and, type things out on my typewriter. Well, a lot of that has disappeared anyway, just by nature of business, which is great. However, there are some things that we've realized that we still do the old school way. I mentioned before to you, we actually have a bookkeeper that comes on site to review our books, every month or every quarter. I honestly don't remember at the moment. And it's turned out that we're thinking, wait, why are we doing this? This didn't make sense before, and it certainly doesn't make sense now. So that's one kind of pressure check or check valve or whatever you want to call it. The other thing that we've realized is I I didn't know, and this is probably true of small and large business, how much I needed to interact face to face with my employees. So on both sides. So either I could pop into one of my young associates' office and ask a question or give an assignment, or they could come down to my office and ask me a question about an assignment. Or say I'm going to jump on a phone call with you. You call me and say, Cole, I have a legal issue, and I grab somebody down the hall and say, Jeff is coming in. We need to talk real quick. That part's missing. And so what we're doing is we're figuring out, how do we recreate that? Is it having a weekly check-in like this? Is it setting up more conference calls where I'm calling a client and I'm bringing in somebody else? That part I haven't quite, I know it sounds silly, but it's hard to duplicate what we used to have in the office. And I'll give you a real quick example and I feel like such an old man because of how I solved this problem, but I had a real estate deal where there were just multiple pieces of property and entities, and none of it made any sense. And I'm just hitting my head against the table going, I can't keep track of this. So I went into my office. Like, I specifically went into the office solely to use the dry erase board so I could write all this out. Now you're saying, like, Cole, why didn't you just do it on a piece of paper? I needed to be in a conference room where I could lay out paperwork and draw up on this thing, kind of mock this up. And then the poor associate that was working on it with me, I called her and FaceTimed her. And I was like, all right, I'm holding my phone. Like, look, I'm drawing this on the board. It was trying to duplicate what we would have otherwise done in the office. And I know that there's technology that, I could share my screen with you right now, right? But there's a certain component that I can't describe. Like, I need that in-person interaction just quicker.
Talking about in-person interactions with your clients, previously they would come to your office, you'd go to their restaurant, you'd meet them somewhere. Now, I imagine a lot of it's done through Zoom and just telephone conference calls. I find myself calling certain people multiple times a day. And by the end of the day, I'm like, God, I feel bad. I'm calling this person so many times, but it used to be down the hall. You'd see them anyway during the day, and you would just have those questions at that time. And now it's like an on-demand phone call thing. So your clients, I'm sure it's fine that, they're cool meeting on Zoom and having phone conversations with the understanding that, the face-to-face isn't really available anymore.
Yeah, but think about this, especially in restaurants. One of the fun parts, and it's why, if I can ever get in front of real estate agents or brokers, all I want to talk to them about is why they should represent restaurants and commercial real estate. Like it's like I'm trying to get people into the cult. So if anybody's actually listening to this, you should do commercial real estate, even though the market is scary right now. I really think it's gonna flush out some of the really good talent. But as part of commercial real estate and working with restaurants, I like the being in person. And this seriously happens, and it's one of the most fun parts of this job. I'll be at a restaurant, and they're like, "Hey, Cole, we're working on this new bolognese. Come on over here, try it." It's the meetings that you have with restaurants are funny. They're at 3 p.m. or midnight, because those are the only downtimes that they have. And man, there's just nothing better than sitting in a restaurant, having a glass of the new wine that they brought in, trying the new food. And the restaurant people, they went into that business because they like people or they like interacting with people. And so, yes, we're doing these Zoom calls and phone calls, but it's a challenge for them. And everybody's doing these happy hours, right? I don't know if you and I have done one yet, but you have a beer in your hand and it's kind of fun at first. And now you're going, wait a minute, I can't do this for the rest of my career.
While our intended audience is for real estate professionals really across the country, there's probably a broader audience that will be appreciating the conversations that we share on our website here. And that website's keepmecertified.com/COVID. But for the real estate professionals watching this, coming from a real estate and business and commercial real estate attorney, do you have any tips that you can share with them in these times that might help them work through their current transaction, something that is new to a transaction that wasn't previously there, something that they should be considering?
There's a lot. So I think one of the things that particularly agents need to be aware of is, and you kind of touched on this, and that is, even though everybody is separate, there is now an expectation that you're available. Well, Jeff, you can't go into the office, so you must be available right now. And I find that in the electronic age that we're in, it was already assumed that you would respond to an email within an hour. It's gotten worse. I will say that, like, I have meetings scheduled for tomorrow and Sunday, and it doesn't even cross people's mind anymore that that used to be a sacred a weekend is the time that you spend with family and you relax a little bit. So my advice to agents, out right now is be aware of that. It's going to happen. You're going to do it as an agent. You're going to say, why didn't this inspector call me back immediately? Or this lawyer, I know Cole's not in the office. I can see, on Zoom, he's in his basement right now. Why hasn't he responded? And I think people forget that you're actually doing work. You're doing other things, and it's not as if the world has come to a stop. So I don't know if that's really advice or more just being aware that, you are going to be expected to respond quicker, but also being cognizant of the other service providers and your clients may not be able to respond as quickly either. The other, and this isn't an advice about what they should do, but I want people to think about this. I keep preaching this. There's a real fear about real estate at the moment, particularly on the commercial side, because of all the things that you and I talked about. Are people going to go to bars? Are they going to go to restaurants? And nobody knows. I think there's going to be a real exodus from commercial real estate on the service side. Brokers, lawyers, maybe even other, not closing agents, but other people that are involved in the process. I think there are some people who maybe were dabbling in it before, right? So maybe you have an agent who is, in retirement, but doing a couple deals here and there. I think those folks are going to say, you know what, this isn't worth it anymore. And so my bet is that things will slow and be pretty tough for probably the next, the rest of 2020, but that will also flush out a lot of the competition. And I think the people that hang in there are actually gonna be even stronger when they come out on the other side. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm not wishing ill will on folks who should be exiting. But I know in real estate, there's some great statistics about who is selling it, particularly on the residential side. There's a lot of people who dabble in it, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. But I think this pushes people closer to saying, I'm already retired. I don't need this headache anymore. And I think that means young professionals can come up and sort of take that, take the reins from there.
It's interesting in sort of a contradictory way. As the owner of a real estate school, there's actually a fair amount of people that we've seen calling us, inquiring about what it takes to be a real estate and what it takes to become a real estate licensee. And I think it's in large part due because they just have so much time on their hands. Like, well, what can I do? What's something that's attainable? And that is to take a course that you can take virtually, similarly through a Zoom conversation, and you can then become eligible to sit and take for the exam. Then you can have your real estate license. A lot of people in Massachusetts, it's a 40-hour course. And in normal times, they don't have 40 hours to spend taking a course. So this has freed up a lot of time. Now, once they get their license, it still may be difficult to break into the industry because things are just generally slower. But I've noticed a lot more interest of people who suddenly decide that they want to get their real estate license because they now have time, and now they're looking for something new because they're currently unemployed. And it's a tough industry to get into in general, but it's a tougher time to do it right now, although it is possible and it's an opportunity for them. On the residential side, I'm seeing, while there's a lower supply than usual, there's still a decent demand for properties.
Sure.
There are multiple here in Boston. I'm working with clients that haven't had the opportunity to place an offer on properties they're interested in because they're in a price point which is typically below $1 million that it just everyone rushes to. And just the other day, there was a property on the market for 2 days. It was the second day I called the listing agent and I said, hey, I've got some clients interested in seeing this. Can we set up a time? Oh no, we're actually going through our best and final round today because we had multiple offers yesterday. And I was like, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. So, there are still a subset of the population that are really out there trying to find a place to live. And sometimes it's at the end of their lease and they're pressured to either make a decision to renew or to buy, or they've been looking forever and maybe they started last year and they couldn't find anything. And there's all sorts of reasons that people are still working towards it. But in the more affordable range of prices, those properties seem to be moving very quickly.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, my dad always said, you need a place to live. Right. And so whether the prices change or interest rates, which of course are, astronomically low right now, the reality is you need to live somewhere. Now the demand in certain areas may change. There's a lot of talk about, do the suburbs just outside of cities, do they see a real uptick because people don't want to live in the urban areas anymore? I'm not sure that really changes, but I'll stay with the refrain. You have to live somewhere.
Yeah.
And we have to eat. So maybe you and I aren't packing into some sports bar to watch the Patriots, even though I'm not even a huge fan. I know that's terrible. That's like sacrilege in this city. But we're social creatures. We're going to need to go out somewhere and eat and be with other people. So how that looks, I don't know. But I to circle back on the agents and the folks coming in, yeah, you can take your classes online now, which is great, right? You can not just take classes to get certified, but also to learn more, to take more what I would call CLEs. And I think you should. I'm rushing into this, and maybe this is suicide, Jeff, but a lot of my colleagues in commercial real estate are seriously trying to learn other crafts. I had a couple lawyers the other day tell me, hey, maybe we should start doing wills and trusts. And I'm like, you know nothing about that. And I think there's this like panic in the street. And I'm saying, and again, this could be completely naive. I'm saying, no, this is what we do really well. We just have to morph. You've got to, maybe the deals take a little bit longer, or maybe they have more contingencies, or maybe you have to renegotiate at least 5 or 6 times because your restaurant isn't as successful as you thought it was going to be. But
I mean, there is still demand for residential space. I just think that there is less volume going around. So there's not enough for everyone is a challenge. So it's a fair judgment call to make if that's the call that's made, to say, hey, we should look into other industries. Because even if you're a great agent or broker, there may not just be enough deals out there in the market to make it worth it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Are you telling me I should put my house on the market right now?
I know a good real estate broker.
I mean, I'm quarantined and my wife may kill me. So I might be calling to enlist your services.
On the residential side, there's a bunch of different COVID-related clauses that people are putting into offers and purchase and sale agreements, just around timing for other professionals, because what used to, lenders are backed up a bit. It's harder to get appraisers out there. So there are different clauses that are been introduced to a real estate residential conveyance. Are there similar COVID-related clauses for commercial?
Not really. And the reason I say that is so people are trying to put them in. It's funny. Every document I get now has a brand new clause that says everybody hears the term force majeure, which is can mean a lot of things. It's kind of broad for meaning things beyond my control. So a lot of leases are now saying, like, people are trying to address this. But the reality is most commercial leases will say, they'll define a force majeure, a strike or a war or a pandemic. But every landlord that I have ever worked with says, sure, you are forgiven from doing certain things during a pandemic. Okay. Like in a restaurant, you're forced to stay open a certain period of time. We will forgive that. But the thing we won't forgive is your payment of rent. So I am seeing clauses, but tenants are still being pushed into paying rent. Just like think about my mortgage, right? Or your mortgage. My bank may insert new clauses, and you said you're seeing things on the residential side, but I still have to pay my mortgage. Now there might be some rent or some relief, right? There might be some programs that you can apply to or refinancing, but I still have to pay. That's true on the commercial side. And to tie it back to earlier part of our conversation about expectations, I got to tell you, it was really hard for the first month of this to explain to restaurants, retail, I've kind of left that out of the conversation, but anybody who's paying rent, a lot of these folks are saying, Cole, I can't open. I shouldn't have to pay rent. And that's a tough, logically you think, okay, I understand what you're saying. It's like buying a car that you can't drive, but that's not the landlord's fault. And so I had to have a lot of very difficult conversations with restaurant folks who are usually pretty loud and excitable, that I can't get you out of this. We have to work a deal.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
This is what we're doing now. My whole life at this moment is trying to work deals with landlords. In fact, I've got to run here in a second. I love this. Can we do this more often?
Yeah, would love to have you back for an update in the future. And thank you for your time. I think we're definitely run over what we thought we would be taking up. And look forward to, I guess, connecting again in the future for an update. I'm sure the people watching this, if they're still watching this at this point, will be back for more, not just with you, Cole, but with other professionals in the real estate industry as well. So thanks.
I'd love to. Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate putting this together.
Take care.
All right. Take care. See ya. Bye.